Okay, we're recorded, we're muted, so let's get rolling. We have really want to just bring people up to date with what's going on in Washington and in Harrisburg. And making an addition to the agenda today, we do have Dave Gasson, who is a frequent guest, and we're glad to have him to talk about low-income housing tax credits and the new Congress. And I know I do have on the agenda to talk about Pennsylvania's Congressional Delegation. We have 3 new representatives. There are committee assignments now. And Dave, if you want to get into any of that, you're more than welcome. You certainly know more. You know folks there better than I do, and the relationships in D.C. But let's start with Dave Gasson and an update on the low-income housing tax credit and what the new Congress holds.
The introduction form and the direct benefit form for youth works.
And again, if you're not speaking, please mute your line with a *6.
Give the original to and I'm just
Dave, are you on?
But anyway.
I am here, Cindy.
That's okay.
Okay. There are folks having a conversation in the background. Maybe you can mute your line, please. Okay. Take it away, Dave.
Okay, thanks. And I know we're 11 days into the new year, but I wanted to wish everybody a happy new year and a happy 2017. There's so much going on in D.C. That we possibly couldn't cover everything in this call. So considering Cindy just wants me to speak on the tax credit, that's what I'll try to limit it to, although I'll mention some on the budget as well, just as much as we know at this point.
Yeah, please do. Yeah, tell us what you know. That's fine.
What we know about the tax credit, or what's changed since the last call, and I don't know how many people on this call were on the last call, but again, we left 2016 with very positive news, and that, of course, being that following the House Ways and Means Committee retreat at the Library of Congress just before the holiday break, or actually just after their holiday break started, but before we all started celebrating the holidays, there was an informal vote of the committee to re-include the low-income housing tax credit in the House blueprint. This came after the meetings that the industry working group, of which I'm a member, had with the Ways and Means Committee staff the day before, actually, the retreat, at which the staff then went to brief the Ways and Means Committee members at the retreat. And at that retreat, they did vote to reinsert the low-income housing tax credit in the House blueprint.
Excuse me just a second. Joyce, are you on? And can you mute all the lines, and then Dave use a *7 to unmute? Joyce, are you there? She may have muted herself and can't hear. Okay, well, it sounds like the background.
Can you still hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, and it sounds like the background noise stopped for now.
Okay. So that piece of good news is what we left 2016 with. What we have not yet had our next meeting with the Ways and Means Committee staff. We are waiting on that, but the fact that they have not called us right away, we consider a good sign in that they are working on a myriad of other issues in the tax reform proposal, and not as much focus on the tax credit now. What we do anticipate is the next meeting we have with the staff will be to discuss what the low-income housing tax credit would have to look like in the environment in which they foresee in tax reform, which would include lower corporate rates, again, a potential change to the depreciation rules and going maybe to an expensing mechanism instead, and what they decide to do with the deductibility of business interests, which would affect the industry. So we are waiting on that call. They know that we're out here. We have had conversations with staff, and they said they would let us know when they're ready to sit down with us again and start talking about the future look of or structure of the tax credit. What we do know a little bit more of now that we didn't know last time is what they would like to do in regards to timing, and that is a critically important issue for the industry, especially concerning what's going on right now with pricing, investment, and so on and so forth. It is the goal of the committee to have a very structured outline of the House tax reform proposal to President Trump's desk sometime shortly after the inauguration, probably going into early February. They have a series of working groups working on the proposal right now, looking at specific issue areas. The one that I will mention is the new markets tax credit. They are specifically trying to figure out how they can work the new markets tax credit into the proposal, which obviously is good news. for a lot of folks who deal in new markets, as well as a number of other provisions as well. So those working groups are working with the goal of getting the full committee, getting a proposal to the President's desk shortly after the inauguration. It would then go through the House process. They would have markup hearings in the Ways and Means Committee. They would try to get Democratic buy-in and see if they could come to an agreement with Democrats, which, of course, is not as important in the House as it is in the Senate, where you simply need a majority vote in the House and on the Ways and Means Committee to pass the proposal and pass a marked-up bill. And the end goal, and this is what's new, the end goal is that they would like to have a bill on the President's desk by the August recess. Now, many people think that that's heavy lifting on their part, especially since the Senate will not be engaged in this process for a little while. They are totally preoccupied with nomination hearings, confirmation hearings. They have the budget they need to deal with. They have the debt ceiling they need to deal with and a number of other issues. So the goal, though, of the end of July, early August, is a positive one for us, in which case we would hope to have a better idea what the proposal looks like and create some certainty within the industry prior to that. If they're looking at July for a proposal, that means that they will have locked in their rate and the specific tax provisions before then. And the sooner we know what the rate is in the proposal, especially if it's above a 20% corporate rate, and what the tax provision, the tax law changes are, the quicker certainty returns to the industry, and we can go about a normal line of business within the industry on the investment side and the development side. So that's the latest and greatest on the tax credit. The only other thing I'll add is that they are still silent on the bond program. There is much consternation about what might happen with bonds. We have not been notified by the staff, and they told us they would, that there have been any conversations specific to what they want to do with private activity bonds. So as soon as we hear anything, if we do hear anything, we'll let the industry know. But I know that I'm getting a lot of calls from folks nervous about potentially them doing away with the bond program. And what I can tell people is that there has been no conversation that has leaked out of the committee, and it is hard to prevent things from leaking out of the committee, that specifically deal with doing away with any of the bond programs. So I would consider business as usual until we hear something, and that the bond program and production through the bond program and the 4% credit will continue as it is right now, although obviously structured in different ways depending on what they do with the tax law and corporate rates, but that until we hear anything, there will still be a bond program at the end of the day, and when that changes or if that changes, we will let you know. On the Pennsylvania delegation, I know that there were very good meetings that were held with Congressman Kelly, Meehan, and Dent over the recess, and that there was a meeting also with Senator Toomey. I can't say that any progress was made with Senator Toomey, although he is much more informed in the program. As I've said in the past, I think Senator Toomey is just one of those members that believes in very little federal or government spending in areas in general, and that he's not a fan of tax credits in general. But it was a positive meeting in the context that a meeting finally took place with the senator on the low-income housing tax credit. On the other hand, the meetings with the Congressional Delegation on the House side were very positive, very strong support for the program, and I think I'm comfortable in reporting from those meetings that that support for, in the context of willing to voice support for the credit, both on the budget side and on the Ways and Means Committee side. So I would encourage you guys to continue to work on the delegation, including Senator Toomey. As I think I reported in our last call, I actually ran into Senator Casey when I was in D.C. just before the holidays, had a great conversation with him. He remains a very strong supporter of the program and has vowed to help us in the context of his role in the Senate Finance Committee and working with other members. So still keep it up and let Senator Casey know that we are out there and that the credit is important to Pennsylvania. But in that regard, I feel comfortable with Senator Casey. And then on the budget, not much new to report. They're working on it, but what we are hearing out specifically of the House side is that it's looking more and more likely that it is going to become it is difficult for them to pass an actual budget for the remainder of FY17, that we very well might have a CR for the rest of the fiscal year going to the end of September. This does not bode well for negotiations just within the Republican conference. On future issues, specifically the debt ceiling, could be very troublesome for them, which the calendar date expiration is March 15th, although as we all become accustomed to, the Treasury Department can take steps to push that deadline out further. But between comments that have been made by the Freedom Caucus, by President-elect Trump himself, and others on the Hill, the debt ceiling, as always, is going to be an interesting debate, despite the fact that Republicans control both the House and the Senate and the White House. So keep your eyes on that. But the budget itself looks like it has fallen victim to the differences between the different caucuses within the Republican conference on spending, and we very well might just have a long-term continuing resolution. That is not great for us in the HUD budget-wise. That will continue to limit spending on the HUD budget, but it also makes many of us nervous in regards to the FY 2018 budget and whether or not we are going to be successful in preventing sequestration from coming back and getting a bipartisan effort to, at a minimum, maintain spending levels on the HUD side. So that is something we are all working the Hill on, educating new members on. And my last talking point is on that, is that we have, this was a fascinating point, and we went over it at Mike Novogradov's conference down in Miami earlier this month. 2/3 of the Congress is new since 2004. A full 2/3. I mean, it kind of goes against those people's arguments for term limits. We have so many new members that have been elected since President Obama came in 2008. And we have a whole new batch of members there now. So it is imperative that folks get to the Hill, but more importantly, as I've always preached, get to them at home. You know, have them visit properties at home, tell them what you're doing at home in regards to the tax credit, in regards to the HUD programs, community development, economic development, job creation, everything. Because this is a very unusual environment that we are moving into right now, especially when it comes to budget priorities. The president would like to spend big on military. He says he would like to spend big on infrastructure, but the Congress is not on board with him yet on infrastructure. And they want to look at the entitlement programs, which, as we all know, parts of the entitlement programs affect housing spending. So we would encourage everybody, as we always do, to redouble and triple their efforts in regards to advocating for the program on the Hill. And I know a lot of people have been doing this, but I would like to do a specific shout-out to Penrose, who I know has put forth a lot of effort with the Pennsylvania delegation over the recess in conjunction with the coalition. I want to thank them for that and encourage everybody else to do everything they can to advocate for housing with your elected representatives. And Cindy, with that, I will stop sucking oxygen out of the room, and I'm happy to answer any questions anybody might have.
Thank you, Dave. I really appreciate that. And before I open it to questions, I just want to make a few more comments related to the budget, the CR, the continuing resolution. I mean, theoretically, continuing resolutions, if they were true to their name, would simply continue funding from the previous year, which these days is better than taking a cut. But as I understand it, Dave, am I correct in my understanding that this CR contained a small cut per the Budget Control Act?
Well, it contained a small cut, but more importantly, the increase that we typically get to the Section 8 voucher program to make up for cost of living,
right.
it cannot occur. We cannot get those fundings if they continue to base the outlays on the previous year's budget.
Exactly.
So that is where we're getting an automatic cut, even though the spending levels theoretically are not changing. So if you maintain and keep doing a CR, the translation for that is a cut.
Yes, and that was the other point that I wanted to make sure that people really understand is this is very bad news for housing choice vouchers. As Dave just said, they've traditionally gotten small increases every year, which does not, the voucher program has, which does not result in new increased number of vouchers. It simply maintains people who currently have vouchers because the cost of rent goes up, the cost of utilities go up. So you need more money just to maintain the same number of vouchers and families being housed with the vouchers. And so this is creating a terrible problem for the voucher program, and the housing authority is trying to figure out what they're going to do. And I assume that it's going to mean that as vouchers get turned back in, they won't be reissued. So, which will result in a cut in the number of people who are able to utilize the program. So, to the extent that we can advocate for a full year, an actual budget, that would be helpful. At least it would be helpful if it actually has good numbers in it. The other possibility, and Dave, again, you would know more about this than I do, is what they call an anomaly, and that's a continuing resolution that doesn't actually continue but makes certain adjustments where there are problems, like with the voucher program, programs that need an adjustment just to go forward in the same vein. Do you see an anomaly as a possibility if they do a full year CR?
Well, Cindy, we tried to do an anomaly before they did the CR, before the holidays, when they addressed the budget then and decided to kick the can down the road again.
Yeah.
And while there was support for it, they were not able to get it through, the entire committee, but more importantly, to get the leadership to agree upon it. It is politically difficult. It is. The last time we did an anomaly was actually that I can recall, was on the USDA budget for R&D, where they had screwed up in regards to calculating, and I mean the R&D office, calculating the proper amount to allocate to cover all the vouchers that were out there. And the Senate caught on to it, and they successfully put an anomaly in the budget in the CR that passed that time. Again, we tried to do that with the HUD budget this time around. We were not successful. Obviously, they will go that course if it becomes more clear that a CR is likely, as opposed to them passing a budget. But you have to understand the circumstances under which they can't pass a budget and the difficulty they're having negotiating funding levels for the 11 remaining departments that they have to fund. So I'm a positive person. I always think positively, like, you know what, charge ahead. I think it's possible. We work with folks to understand the significance and the importance of these programs, and certainly Senator Collins and other folks do, Senator Blunt and folks on the Appropriations Committee that deal with these issues. But at the same time, I'm a realist, so I don't tell anybody to count on getting that extra funding level. But we're going to do everything we can to try to accomplish that.
Okay.
Can I ask a question, Cindy?
Go right ahead.
It's Joyce. Hey, Dave. Thanks, as always.
Hey, Joyce.
I feel a little deflated, but I'm going to fight through that. So we're getting ready, and Cindy's going to talk about it in a little bit, to sort of go on the road in district offices and in D.C., but certainly soon scheduling meetings around the state with new members and members who have been in the House before, and both Senator Toomey and Senator Casey. For the ask on one thing on what we've heard from Senator Toomey's office before, from the D.C. person that we've worked with, is that what Senator Toomey is clear on is he wants to do no harm. But given what we've heard from housing authorities, and I think Cindy mentioned it, if it's a continuing resolution at the same amount, they will have to potentially cut vouchers to people. They've used their reserves. They, have over the last few years made some, been efficient in how they're running things. So I think that might be a talking point when talking with Senator Toomey's office on the budget piece of it, at least. But this will, in fact, do harm to families that are...
Well, Joyce, if I can, one of the things that I think it's always helpful to tell these folks that's effective is the number of people that are applying for vouchers in the waiting list versus how many that they're actually able to allocate and what the general need is. And specific examples. I mean, with the road show you guys are going to do, I would strongly encourage you, and I know you're doing this anyhow, but if I don't say it, I'm going to kick myself for the rest of the day, is that give them specific examples of where these programs are working in their districts, especially the new members who we know don't know what these programs are. And if they've heard of them, they think there's something other than what they are. Give them specific examples. Tell them where their properties are in the district, that if you can't take them there, they can at least go, and maybe you can do an event there later, because if they don't see it and understand it and meet the people that are living there and see what it accomplishes, it's just noise compared to that blends in with all the other noise that they're hearing from other constituents. So we have to have them taste, and feel and see the properties so that they have a greater appreciation for these programs.
Yeah, we're with you on that. Definitely, we will continue to do that. And then, thank you. And then my other question was, and maybe this isn't valid anymore, what about the increasing the tax, doubling the tax credit? Is that like the bill that was in the Senate?
Well, I don't want you to be deflated, so what I'm going to tell you is that we are very much on board, as is Senator Cantwell, with reintroducing the Cantwell-Hatch bill. Senator Hatch has initially reacted positively to this, but he's kind of preoccupied right now. I think I might have mentioned this in our pre-holiday call, but his staffer, who knows intimately the details, has spoken at our Housing Advisory Group meeting, at the coalition meeting, and every meeting, and who is responsible for the tax credit, is also responsible for nominations coming before the Finance Committee and the confirmation. So Nick is totally inundated with things other than the tax credit. Okay. We are waiting for the conversation to take place between Senator Hatch and Senator Cantwell on reintroducing the bill. We are hopeful that Senator Hatch will sign on. We don't know if it will be one bill or two bills. If it is two bills, it will likely be something similar to S 3237, which was the comprehensive bill, and then the second bill will only be the cap increase, more than likely. So one bill would just be the 50% increase, and then the second bill would be the 50% increase, but everything else that was included in the comprehensive bill, to give members the opportunity and for us to work the members and their staff to get them on board with doing everything under the sun. Now, what I will say is this, because we've been having these conversations with other members of the Finance Committee staff and members on the Finance Committee themselves, is that much of 3237, which would be much-needed changes to the tax credit program to help you guys run the program more efficiently, give you more leeway with using the credit, building housing, so on and so forth, there's no cost to it. So that could easily be accomplished in the context of tax reform without adding cost to the proposal and therefore not allowing them to lower the baseline on rates. And everybody's very much aware of that. So, again, that's another reason behind the one bill, two bill scenario. So we're waiting to hear back from Senator Cantwell on when that conversation is going to take place between she and Senator Hatch. But as of right now, Senator Cantwell absolutely intends to reintroduce the cap increase legislation.
And just, great, that's helpful. Thank you. And we really appreciate you getting on the call and keeping us informed in Pennsylvania. And to my deflated, I will not be deflated for long. Cindy and I are both, like you, positive, and we've been advocating for more affordable housing and preventing and ending homelessness for a long time, and it's not been easy under any kind of administration. So we will get our put our chin to the, whatever the word is, we are ready to, continue on with what we've been doing for the last every year. So thanks. Thanks, Cindy.
Yeah. Does anyone else have a question for Dave? *7 to unmute your line. All right. Well, thank you.
This is Jeff from Silk. I have a question.
Yes.
You mentioned the tax credit bill. So has a new version of that been reintroduced, or is that going to be reintroduced?
Jeff, are you talking about the Cantwell-Hatch bill?
Yes.
The cap increase. Not yet. Senator Cantwell intends on reintroducing it. She's just waiting to have a conversation with Senator Hatch to decide, A, if he is going to remain on the bill, which certainly we hope he will, because if not, that raises new issues for us, and then if so, B, when they would reintroduce it. So it has not been reintroduced yet, but we expect that it will be sometime, hopefully in the near future.
Is there any chance of there being a House counterpart on this?
Congressman T-Berry. We've had lots of conversations with Congressman T-Berry. He is very much interested in the provisions of the bill other than the 50% increase. And the only reason Pat is worried about that is because of the cost. Now, what we can do as kind of a back channel way, which is the conversations we're having with Ways and Means, Jeff, is that if we have to tweak the bill to fit within tax reform, and that's what we're working with the staff on, and they understand that if they lower rates and they change laws, we are going to have to tweak the tax credit so that it, at a minimum, continues to produce the same amount of housing we do right now. That opens the door for us to actually add resources to the program, to produce more housing, which works us towards the 50% increase. So that is, sneakily what we are working on right now, is modeling a tax credit that would actually increase funding levels for the tax credit and produce more housing, which, if we are successful in doing that, it almost takes the 50% increase off the table, and then we can just work on the other provisions, which is what Pat Teaberry is much more comfortable with. So you might get Teaberry introducing a bill in the House, which could be almost everything except for the 50% increase and the fixed 4% credit. So it would have income averaging and all the other provisions in S3237, and he is favorably inclined to do that. But he, because it makes sense to do so, is waiting to see what Senators Hatch and Cantwell do on the other side of the Hill. Because if they are not successful in introducing the bill in the Senate, then it is not worth his time to introduce the bill in the House. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Any other questions for Dave? Okay, thank you, Dave. Really appreciate it. And of course, you're welcome to stay on. But I know you're busy. I understand if you need to get off, but you're welcome to stay on.
Great. Thanks, everybody. I am going to jump off. So if you have any other questions, Joyce and Cindy both have my email. And as I've always said, don't be shy about calling or sending me an email, and I'll get right back to you.
Thanks, Dave. All right. Before we leave Washington, let me just run through the delegation and who they are, where they are. We do have 3 new members: Lloyd Smucker, Dwight Evans, and Brian Fitzpatrick. Joyce, do you know, or maybe Jeff, anybody know yet whether they have gotten committee assignments? I know we were making phone calls and trying to find that out.
This is Jeff. I haven't heard anything yet.
Okay. All right. Well, we will get back to all of you on that because we are working to figure out who all the housing staffers are and the committee assignments. I can tell you, though, the committee assignments, at least assuming that they continue the same as last session, I can tell you the assignments of our the rest of the delegation. And then I just really want to emphasize that, as Joyce said, we are working on arranging district visits, especially we've got some key people that I will emphasize. And also, just to emphasize that you don't have to wait for us. So whether your representative is on a key committee or not, invite him and his staff to visit what you're doing. As Dave said, show them. Don't just tell them. You go into an office and you sit down and you talk with them about programs and numbers. When they deal with the budget, they're dealing with thousands upon thousands of programs and numbers. And we have to really translate for them what these line items mean in their community. So whether it's a homeownership counseling program, and you can invite them to meet some of the families that you're working with, or a tax credit development, or public housing, or any other sort of project that you're working on, make sure that they see it. And if you can, introduce them to some of the families that you're working with. So let me mention, first of all, Senator Toomey, and of course we've been focusing more on the Republicans because clearly they're in the majority in both House and Senate. I will say Senator Casey, the Democrat, has been a supporter, but it's still important to get a commitment from him to stand up and speak for these programs. But Senator Casey is on the Finance Committee. Senator Toomey is actually on Finance, on the Budget Committee, and on the Committee on Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs. So he's a really key person in the housing world. The Finance Committee, of course, will oversee tax stuff. But the Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs Committee is important, including he is the chairman of the subcommittee on financial institutions and consumer protection, and we're likely to see some changes there too. And then clearly budget is important. I think Dave mentioned meetings with Congressman Dent, Kelly, and me, and so Dent is on the Appropriations Committee in the House. These are all House members, of course. As is Matt Cartwright, who's a Democratic member. And Kelly and Meehan are on Ways and Means, which is overseeing the tax credit stuff that the low-income housing tax credit Dave was talking about. Congressman Rothfuss is also on financial services in the House, and subcommittee on housing and insurance, subcommittee on financial institutions and consumer credit. The other interesting thing is that many of our members are on transportation and infrastructure. Now, we haven't had much to do with that in the past, but as you know, the new administration is focusing a lot on infrastructure, and I think it's incumbent upon us to get them thinking in terms of housing, blight remediation, community development as part of infrastructure work. So on that committee, we've got Lou Barletta, infrastructure, Scott Perry. Actually, Bill Schuster is chairman of that committee, and so the three of them. I thought there was a fourth, but Schuster, Perry, and Barletta on transportation and infrastructure. But again, all of the members are important. They all have a say, and making sure that they know what these programs are doing in their districts, in your communities, is just so important. I can't emphasize it enough. If you want to work with us in doing a district visit, please let Joyce know.
Cindy?
Yeah.
Could I maybe just interject here for a sec?
Sure.
So Cindy said that we would be moving along. Before we sort of close up this item, I just wanted to ask people on the phone. I know there are like over 80 people who signed up today. If anyone can tell us if they've done anything in their district office in terms of reaching out to our federal legislators, your congressman or your senator, and we will be sending out a invite to everyone to join these. We are in the process of doing it. We are also going to be sending an organizational sign-on letter probably once Ben Carson is confirmed his confirmation hearings tomorrow. So our plan is to do an organizational sign-on letter soon, and then we'll start to schedule district visits. But I just wanted to open up to see if anyone had any thoughts or feelings or had been doing things in their district. As Dave Gasson mentioned, I think Penrose has been on the road already, and we've been talking to Senator Toomey's D.C. office and others. But maybe, if it's okay, Cindy, just take a couple of minutes. Again, to unmute is *7 if anyone has any thoughts or anything they want to add. Or
Joyce?
This is Cindy Picone with A.M. Rodriguez Associates in Pittsburgh. We reached out to the regional manager in Senator Toomey's office and toured her at one of our local senior buildings. And she said, this was back, before the election, and she said to circle back with them in January. I planned on having my next step being inviting them to our groundbreaking for a couple of properties in the area that are going to happen early this year. But if there's something a specific message you want me to convey to her, we explained that the facility was a low-income housing tax credit development, and there was the Cantwell-Hatch legislation, and we were hoping to see the senator support that.
I think all of that sounds good. We probably will be doing visits, so maybe we can add you to. Oftentimes when we do group visits, it's good to have like a service provider, someone like yourself, a builder, developer, that it's really a lot of people are in the mix here. It affects the communities in very real ways for the families and individuals, but it's also, as Dave Gaffin has said and Cindy said many times before, it's an economic driver for communities as well. So that's great. Great you met with them in October.
And I would also ask if you might be able to identify a resident who would make a favorable impression and be able to speak with, be part of the group, just to be part of the group to tell his or her story, a success story. So, and that's a question to everyone on the phone, really, to think about the people that you're working with, and we can help. I know Joyce has done some advanced work talking to the residents to, emphasize what points they need to make and aspects of their story, go through their story.
This is Garrett from PA CDC, and we haven't done any in-person meetings, but we we've written letters and made phone calls to Senator Toomey's office and encouraged our members to do so as well around the Community Development Block Grant Program, in particular the threats that he made to cut that program over the sanctuary city issue.
Thanks, Garrett.
This is Caroline from Episcopal Community Services in Philadelphia. I just wanted to say that I found that discussion about the housing vouchers very, very, very important. We have an emergency housing facility in West Philadelphia. When we get a family that has a voucher like that, no joke, the social services supervisor says it's like gold. And I mean, I can't emphasize that enough. And I thought this was a good discussion and has motivated me to take some information back here at ECS about that, because they're so rare and precious now. I can't imagine what it's going to be like if we just see the number decrease. But again, how to make these folks understand how precious they are, right? So that's just my comment. Thank you for the conversation.
And Carolyn, if you could think, I think what Cindy said before to Cindy from Pittsburgh, is if there's someone in your community, a resident who is comfortable telling their stories. We've been in these meetings many times, and I can talk until I'm blue in the face, but if there's someone who's working hard and playing by the rules and still not making ends meet, but with a little help or opportunity can turn their, help their family, that story is way, oftentimes with you and with a developer, very effective.
Yes, thank you. Thanks. And
Joyce, I'm thinking maybe we should organize a call just around doing visits and outreach. Because I'm looking at the clock now; it's 20 to 12. So, and I know we have Bill Fontana on to talk about some state stuff. So I think this is really exciting that people have been reaching out and are interested in doing so. And it's really just about talking about our passion about helping these folks, but. I don't think there's anybody in the delegation who doesn't want to help his constituents. So again, it's getting them out there to see what the money is doing.
What you think, Cindy? Like maybe have wants to have a special call around advocacy around the federal budget.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll do some more internal work and maybe pin down the budget, the committees for the new members. I know that you and Tori are starting to work on some visits, so we'll put out the general call to who would like to get involved.
Sounds great.
Okay. All right. Thank you all. It's good discussion. But I do want to turn to the state, and Bill Fontana, you're still with us?
I think so. Do you hear me?
Yeah, yes, I hear you. Very
okay.
good. Very good. So I'll just, by way of introduction, say, of course, we have a new legislature in Harrisburg also. Some changes in the makeup, although still both chambers controlled by the Republicans with stronger majorities. And some new committee chairs, which I'll go over. But they are approaching budget season. I guess February 9th for both the president. Well, no, the president may have more time in his first year, but for Governor Wolf, so the budget addressed. And Bill, you've been involved in advocating for funding. I should introduce you as, what is your title? Executive Director?
Executive Director.
At the Pennsylvania Downtown Center. Working with the Elm Street and Main Street managers, and working very hard to continue funding, increase funding for Keystone Communities. So you want to tell us what you're hearing, what you're seeing?
Well, I know we're getting late, and it will not be a long report. There is not, and Andy's on the phone from DCED as well, so he can chime in if he has any additional information. Obviously, last year, in last year's budget, there was, a great deal of, Cindy, is confusion the correct word? When the budget was approved, we had started the year out with about $6 million in the Keystone Communities program, a little over that, and when the final budget came out for the previous year, or for I guess 16-17, the amount in the budget had increased from $6 million to a little over $12 million, but then there was a supplemental appropriation for 15-16 that also increased that year's budget to a little over $12 million. The interesting part of all of that is that for those of you who are conversant with state budget goings-ons, that in the fiscal code there was only about $450,000 that had been tagged for a specific project, which according to our calculations should have left around $11.5 million for discretionary funding for Main Street, Elm Street, accessible housing, what we used to think of as housing and redevelopment assistance, and is now kind of all combined into the same line item. But we were told by the Department of Community and Economic Development that essentially those programs were flat funded. So I will allow you to draw your own conclusions as to what that meant for the additional $5.5 million plus or minus in each of those two fiscal years. If you have applied for money from the Keystone Communities program out of the 16-17 fiscal year, I guess that the first round of funding was due in October. There is a second round of funding currently open. The deadline for that application is January 25th. And at this point, there have been no formal announcements, at least as far as Main Street and Elm Street dollars are concerned. I don't know if some of the other of you who may have heard if you applied for something else, but Main Street and Elm Street funding certainly has not been a formal notification yet. My understanding is that something will probably be forthcoming on the round one money in the near future, and then depending on what is left, there will be some allocation of the round two money, probably sometime before the beginning of May, I would imagine. DCED likes to have their contract signed, sealed, and delivered on or about May 1st. So where we are at this point, and I'm sure Cindy will weigh in on this, is as we are all aware, the indications are that things are not particularly pretty for the 17-18 fiscal year budget. The big unknown is whether or not, if there is in fact some additional cuts to DCED, will they occur strictly from against some of the bigger ticket items, or will they still kind of drill down into things like the Keystone Communities program? There's not a whole lot left to cut at DCED, so there is some sense that if there is a significant budget shortfall, DCED may not be the best place to find that money, because there's not a whole lot left there. My hope would be that if it is in fact a tough year, that if the legislature still wants to put some project money away, whether or not Keystone Communities will still come out around the $12 million figure remains to be seen. My hope would be that it would not drop below the discretionary level of funding that it had for this year, which is about $6 million. We have been arguing for some time that to deal effectively with blight, with community development issues, and with kind of the accessible housing sort of projects that are out there, that Keystone Communities line item really needs to be in the $15 to $20 million range, given current budget realities. In the 14-15 fiscal year budget, before things fell apart, we had a proposal for a $25 million budget that was supported by actually some of the Republican senators, but when the whole deal fell apart, that's where we were left. So, we are not terribly optimistic that we're going to see any particular increases this year, but I think that we are cautiously optimistic that we will not see any discretionary funding cuts below where we've been for the last couple of years, which is in the $6 to $7 million figure for this line item. So
it's hard
you can
to go
jump
much
in
lower.
there.
No, I was just saying it's hard to go much lower.
Well, yeah, I mean, without just saying, why bother?
And I know Jeff Eisman is on the phone, Jeff, and you deal with the home modification aspect of Keystone Communities. Do you have any other thoughts?
Yeah, actually, thanks for it. Yeah, we don't deal with it directly, but a lot of the Centers for Independent Living and other disability organizations either have gotten funds for home mods through DCED, or we want working with another organization. What's the status again of as far as the home mods money for 16-17? Is that going out, or where are we at on that?
Are you talking about the accessible housing program?
Yes.
My understanding is that it's all wrapped up in right now. It's all in the same pot of money, right? I mean, they have $6 million for that fund that's discretionary, and they make their determinations out of what the requests that they get in. Usually, sometime after the decisions are made, we will get a printout of who got what money, and I mean the reality is that even though a lot of the Main Street and Elm Street programs in the Commonwealth do apply for those funds, there are a significant number of projects that get funded that are not Main Street and Elm Street designations, and that are not necessarily accessible housing programs. Now, the party line is that if you are a designated Main Street or Elm Street or a program that has been using the accessible housing funds in the past, you're supposed to get priority. I think that the department does a pretty good job of trying to stick with that protocol, but there are certainly projects that slip into the funding every year that are not part of that. So as far as I know, and I know I work with Beverly Hutzel pretty closely, she's a strong proponent for the accessible housing program within the Keystone Communities line item, and at this point I have no reason to think that it's going to be any different than it was last year.
Okay, the other question I had is on waiting lists for the home mods money. I've heard that DCD sort of keeps an email list. Do you have any numbers? Like, is it 50, 100? Is there
I don't. Number? I can try to find out for you how many people are on the waiting list for that. I can try to find out.
Yeah, this money helps to save the Commonwealth quite a few dollars by keeping folks out of nursing homes or other institutional settings when they can get home and community-based services to go with it. So,
sure.
Thank you.
Okay.
And I would just add to the overall budget picture, once again, revenues are coming in below what was projected for the year. And, as you all know, last year we didn't have significant sources of new revenue, and don't know what the appetite will be this year. I mean, I heard from even Republican staffers 4 years ago, well, we've cut to the bone. There's nothing left to cut. But of course, that continues to be the approach, and so I don't know if there will be any change of heart, if any more will come to the conclusion that there's nothing left to cut. I'm concerned that with many new members who have come in on a smaller government platform, that, again, they'll be looking to downsize. I did read today that Governor Wolf will be again proposing a severance tax, although nobody knows the details of it. So he'll be looking for new revenue. Certainly there are many folks who talk about the structural deficit, the problems with the way the budget is currently put together, that there's simply not enough revenue to cover all the things that the state needs to pay for. So we will see where all of that goes, but that does make it very difficult to get increases. On the other hand, they do spend $30 billion a year, so we can hope that another million or two comes our way. Are there other questions for Bill or comments about the state budget? Star 7. If you have muted your phone, you can use star 7 to unmute. All right. And then I just want to mention new committee chairs on the state level. We don't have committee membership yet, but the chairs have been named. So, of course, we most often deal with the Urban Affairs committees. House Urban Affairs has have two new chairs, Mark Keller on the Republican side from Perry County, and Michael O'Brien, Democrat from Philadelphia. Senate Urban Affairs has a new Republican chair, Tom McGarrigle from Delaware County, Delaware and Chester. The Democrat Wayne Fontana from Allegheny County will continue. He was chair last year.
No relation.
Right. Let me see what else. Finance, the neighborhood assistance bill that we talked about in the past, and we'll talk again about on another call, to expand the neighborhood assistance program, that went through the finance, or was sent to the finance committee. So I believe we continue in the House with Bernie O'Neill from Bucks County, Jake Wheatley from Allegheny County. In the Senate Finance is Scott Hutchinson and John Blake. Appropriations is the same in the Senate, and that would be Pat Brown from Lehigh and Vince Hughes from Philadelphia. In the House, we have a new Republican chair because Representative Adolph retired, so Stan Saylor from York County is the new Appropriations Chair, and Joe Markosik from Allegheny continues as the Democratic Chair. If anybody wants to know a specific committee that I haven't mentioned, I have them up in front of me. You can ask. So again, I'll open the lines. *7 to unmute your line. Any questions or comments?
Cindy, can I ask a question? How many people on the phone do apply for Keystone Communities money?
Anyone who has applied for Keystone Communities?
We have. This is Tammy with the City of Reading. We applied for the IEP grant.
Okay. Thank you.
It's Joe Willett from PEC in Philly. Somehow we're in that mix.
You're not sure?
Different department, huh, Joe?
It's a different department, yes. Mm-hmm.
Cindy, it's Pat Mack from Northumberland County. We are in as well through our LIGHT program and home rehabilitation.
Okay.
Great.
It's Jeff from PA Silk. We have a few Centers for Independent Living. Lehigh Valley has, I believe, Abilities in Motion applied last year. There may be a couple others. Those are the ones that I know of.
Okay. Well, hopefully by the time of the next briefing, we will have some information on awards that have been made. So I'll do my best to try to get some information out to Cindy as soon as I hear anything.
Great. Thank you, Phil. All right. Well, we are at the 12 o'clock hour, or will be in a minute.
Cindy?
Yeah?
I'm sorry, it's Joyce again.
Yes.
I just wanted to say one more thing about, I'm back to the federal thing. If anybody wants to talk through any of this or wants to do anything immediately, feel free to call the Housing Alliance office in Jenkintown. Talk to me, talk to Tori, 215-576-7044. Just shoot us an email and we can get on the phone now. It's a work in progress, but if people are chomping out the bit to do stuff soon, please just reach out to us. Thanks.
Thanks, Joyce. Yeah, I think we have a lot of opportunities. I mean, I know that it's been a very strange year, but I see opportunities, and I think the thing that excites me most, and I will say, like Dave, I'm a very optimistic person. Sometimes recently it's been hard, but what really does excite me is seeing the level of activism rising, and that people are getting engaged, and that, after all, is what makes the system work is having people engaged. So on that note, I will say thank you for getting on, and we will talk to you in February.
Thanks, Cindy.
Bye.
Thank you, Cindy.
Thanks, Cindy.
Take care.